Are we expecting any of the others? I know Bill's in New York. Me, for some reason, they say, oh, the elevators. Me, for some reason, they say, I guess I got the elevators over here. I guess I just looked. Right. Right. Oh, that's
Anyone else knows the warning? Anyone else knows the warning?
There are 20 spaces in restaurants that have a special unique burger. They're all $5.99. Give me a list because I can't eat. Give me a list because I can't eat. Actually, I should say 5 days. Actually, I should say 5 days. You're already there. You're already there. Yeah.
Well, I've seen it a lot. Yeah. What he said in court. I mean, this man. Did they rule? So we don't know. How do you think I did that? Because I was trying to tie it into it was intentional. You know?
Accidentally ran into somebody who was trying to
Did anybody like that?
Testing. You guys hear me? Testing. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping rules, or notes rather. Restrooms, if you go out this door, you go right and then left and left. You can see the men's restroom. It's 6 o'clock, so we're going to get started. First and foremost, I want to say thank you and welcome for coming out on this evening. I want to first also note and say thank you to Pastor Turner, Dr. Turner, who at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church has been very, very gracious with allowing us to be here on this evening. So again, many thanks to Pastor Dr. Turner and Ms. Boone and the entire MBCC team. Let me introduce myself. I'm Ed Stanton III. I'm the former U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Tennessee, a lifelong Memphian, proud graduate of Central High School and Memphis State and now University of Memphis undergrad and law school. We'll introduce the team that I have, the monitoring team, shortly that we have here on this evening. But before we get started, I want to kind of, you may say, well, why are we here? What's kind of the guidepost or the rationale of having a community engagement forum? How do we get here? Many of you all may know that on last year, there was a trial, ACLU versus the City of Memphis, and it dealt with something called the Kendrick Consent Decree. That decree, at the trial, that is, the court judge, federal court, district court judge, John McCullough, found that the city had violated certain portions of the Kendrick consent decree. That decree was entered into by the city of Memphis in 1978. So at that point, roughly 40 years later, that the court made this ruling for a 40-year-old consent decree. Part of the judge's ruling as sanctions to the city last year was that he wanted to appoint an independent monitor to monitor the city of Memphis, and particularly with the MPD, to make sure that it is in compliance with the consent decree. And you guys don't mind, I'll just kind of step out a little bit, but the consent decree itself, without getting into all of the weeds, and I will say this, please go, if you have not seen, MemphisPDMonitor.com. We've set up a website, MemphisPDMonitor.com. In fact, as a part of our role in being transparent and having accountability, right now, if you go to that website, we should be streaming live, and tonight's forum will also be archived and placed on the website for those that would like to go back and maybe could not have been here this evening. But in essence, the trial, the court found that in the consent decree that there were certain items and things that the city, protocols and procedures that the city would put in place to avoid quote-unquote political intelligence. In ruling that the city had violated those portions of the agreement, one portion of the sanctions was that the city, that the court would have independent monitoring. And he appointed me late last December of 2018. Along with myself serving as a monitor, there's a monitoring team, again, who I'll introduce shortly, that we have since early this year, 2019, January of 2019, we've been working literally weekly around the clock to ensure compliance. I'll kind of give an update of what that means, compliance with the section that the court said the city cannot violate the consent decree and conduct political intelligence where it meets the First Amendment, violating the consent decree and then their First Amendment implications of free speech. And we all know that now there's social media, there are body cams, and there are a number of other things that puts that into the foray of potential political intelligence. So let me, at this point, introduce the team so you'll know who is here. Just kind of a backdrop, very briefly, the agenda tonight. I'm going to give an overview, a brief overview of just kind of what we've been doing, what the team's been doing. Next, we will have, after that updated report, we will have representatives from the ACLU of Tennessee. And they were the plaintiffs in the case that was brought and tried last year before federal judge John McCollum. They will give an updated brief report and remarks on their behalf, and also have here on this evening representatives from the city of Memphis, command staff, and legal department. Anywhere you want to sit, sir? And so we will hear from them as well. And really one of the mainstays of this evening, we want to hear from you. We want to hear, again, so Judge McCollum, you interviewed me for the monitorship program when it was recommended. One of the things that we put in our proposal was that we would have accountability and transparency with this process. And if the community is not engaged and there's not a trust in the fact of, or the work that we're doing, then it's somewhat null and void on a number of levels. And so one part of this was that we would continue to engage the community. That is why we have the website that's been launched. This is the first of a number of these sessions. The next one will probably be later this year. We're looking at maybe October, but we will be in touch in that regard. So that is the backdrop of kind of why we're here this evening. I'll give an update on the report of kind of what we've done since being appointed by Judge McCollum. But let me first start with our team here. We have a diverse team that's from literally across the country of experts we call subject matter experts. The first is the deputy monitor. This is Jim Ledden to my immediate right. Jim is also a former federal prosecutor. Actually, he was the U.S. attorney in the city of New Orleans, and he has 36 years of being a prosecutor and handling matters as it relates to civil rights and First Amendment, and again, serving as the United States attorney. In fact, at one point, Jim was the longest serving United States attorney, having been appointed by 2 presidents and reappointed, serving in that capacity in New Orleans. So we're happy to have Jim as the deputy monitor of the team. Next to Jim, we have Rachel Levington Waldman. Rachel is here from Washington, D.C., and Rachel is Senior Counsel to the Brennan Center's Liberty and National Security Program, also affiliated with NYU. And Rachel is here. She's our social media expert, and she has been active on issues relating to policing and technology, including providing commentary on law enforcement access to social media, predictive policing, body cameras, license plate readers, and other types of surveillance technologies deployed in public. So we're happy to have Rachel to be a part of our team. Sitting to Rachel's right is John Hennigan, and John is our First Amendment expert, subject matter expert. John is a partner of the law firm of Butler Snow, and he resides in the office in Ridgeland, Mississippi, but in the space of First Amendment rights, everything from privacy workshops, media firms, university newspapers. He's been involved, authored a number of different articles published throughout the country, and so he is someone that we lean heavily on in the First Amendment arena as a subject matter expert. Sitting to Mr. Hennigan's right is Theron Bowman, Dr. Bowman. We call him T. Bowman. And Dr. Bowman is a police law enforcement expert. Dr. Bowman is a former police chief of the Arlington, Texas Police Department. He is a police practices expert and also the president and CEO of the Bowman Group. We're fortunate to have T on board, or Dr. Bowman on board. He has a vast experience serving on monitoring teams in Baltimore, as well as New Orleans, and just recently he was appointed to serve on the monitoring team in Chicago. So again, very, very well versed in depth of experience with Dr. Bowman. And last but certainly not least, to his right is David McGriff. Mr. McGriff, he recently served as the Deputy Commissioner and Chief of Staff of the Department of Safety and Homeland Security here in Tennessee. Mr. McGriff is our audit and compliance expert, and he has a deep background in policing, as he began his esteemed career in law enforcement 44 years ago when he began as a police officer in Washington, D.C., with the Metropolitan Police Department, District of Columbia. And then he later joined as a Memphis Police Department officer in 1974. So when we talk about audit and compliance and someone to look at the framework of what's being done as we're changing and modifying policies and procedures, Mr. McGriff's role, as all of the panel members, is very critical. So what have we been doing over the last 6-7 months as the monitoring team? Well, what we've been doing is every week we have met, oftentimes video calls, conference calls. We've had in-person meetings here in Memphis. I will say we've met with, one of the first meetings we had was with Director Rollins and his command staff and his legal team, the city attorney and his team. There are a number of pages, thousands of pages of policies, procedures, and protocols as it relates to training, as it relates to social media, searches, reviews, and everything within that space as it relates to political or potential political intelligence pursuant to the Kendrick consent decree. And so what we've been doing before we could do anything and start advising anything, we had to look at the starting point. Let us see the policies that you have in place. I will say that Judge McCall has been very active, and after the ruling last year, he instructed the city in January of this year to come up with recommended and new policies and procedures to address some of the issues that he felt had been violated in the case ACLU versus the city of Memphis. The court then instructed us to take a look at the recommendations of the city. He allowed the ACLU to weigh in and provide their input. And so we, as a team, have been reviewing those submissions from the city as well as the ACLU and giving ultimately our recommendations. So those are just, we've invited obviously the city and the ACLU for their opinions and their thoughts, but ultimately we, when you say independent, we are an independent body, you can tell from across the country, locally and nationally, where we're giving our recommendations ultimately to the court. And again, Judge McCall has made it clear that we should be, quote, eyes and ears of the court. So we don't report to the police department, we don't report to the ACLU, we report our findings directly to Judge McCall of the court. after reviewing a number of, and we're still doing this, so I just want to be clear that this is somewhat early in the process. We're not done. We have got quite a bit accomplished. But after reviewing our first review, if you will, back in February, we met with city officials. And again, we had an opportunity to meet with Director Rollins. He pledged to support Chief Crow and many of the other command staff members. We visited a number of different places that we wanted to see real-time boots on the ground, this entire team. I won't go into all the details of what we've done and who we've met with, but I can tell you it's been extensive. And since then, since we've been appointed, there's not a week that goes by, maybe one or two with holiday weeks, that we have not been on the phone in a conference, either face-to-face, but interfacing with MPD, requesting additional information and documents. And then again, every week we caucus, oftentimes up to 3 or 4 hours, a robust debate as to what we think is in the best interest policy-wise of making sure that the city does not violate the consent decree, Kindred consent decree going forward. That's our charge. I want to just put a pause right there and make sure, I kind of told you what we've been charged with doing, and that is ensuring compliance, that the city does not violate the consent decree going forward. But this is not a widespread, so I want to be clear on this evening of what we have not been charged with. And this is not, while we are the monitors in that space of ensuring that the city does not violate the Kindred consent decree and conduct, quote, political intelligence. I want to be clear that that is our narrow scope of what the judge has emboldened or instructed us to do. And so I was having a conversation earlier today, and again, we welcome feedback and comment, but again, this is not a clearinghouse where we're monitoring all activities, but we have certain prescribed duties under Judge McCullough's order. So I want to be clear in that regard. So we have continued to review documents, and so where we are now, we have come down the, we'll say, somewhat of a home stretch. We've given a report, and we have a quarterly report. I welcome everyone and invite everyone to go. Many of you just walked in, did hear me earlier, but if you have not looked, memphispdmonitor.com. memphispdmonitor.com, wealth of information, everything that we have filed, all of the court, unsealed court rulings, opinions, filings. You can find them all there. There is a place also where we solicit feedback and comments. You can email us. As I mentioned, now we are being streamed real time. So our goal, again, is to be as transparent as possible, as accessible as possible, and as accountable as possible. But if you have not had that opportunity, please go to memphispdmonitor.com. We have filed those reports. You will find our quarterly reports. In fact, we have another report coming up later this month. We have gone before Judge McCullough back in April. He wanted a status update of what we have done, and we shared with the court what we've done, and he also gave us instructions that he wanted a 90-day plan. So Judge McCullough has been very deliberate in making sure we stay on track and meet the goals of ensuring that we have the appropriate training policies, protocols, and procedures in place, and recommendations to the court to adopt. So that is what we've been doing. We have another hearing before Judge McCullough coming on in August. And again, those are open to the public. You can hear from the judge himself as we give our update. At the update that we had for Judge McCullough in April, he also allowed the city of Memphis and had questions for the city and counsel for the city, as well as for the ACLU, to get their input on how things are going and the job that we're doing as the monitoring team. Any questions so far? As far as and I will say this, there will be a opportunity. We'll open the mic up for anyone that has questions. I do want to make the note too that we are live streaming this. So I know there's a sensitivity of cameras and individuals saying we're not asking for a list of names of who's coming in, but our job again is to be as transparent as possible. We know a lot of folks couldn't come tonight, and so that is why we are live streaming this and recording only for those purposes. So again, if and when you speak, the cameras are in the back. If you don't want to turn around and identify your face, if you don't want to give your name, you don't have to. But again, the purpose tonight, the cameras, real time, is again to be as transparent as possible about what we're doing and being able to share that with the community. That is pretty much a brief update of what we've done so far, the role that we have, and again, ensuring that the city does not violate the Kendrick consent decree. And I will tell you this, that it's a lot of what we're dealing with. I won't say it's complicated, but there are issues because if you look at 1978 as an example, we didn't have the internet or social media, and so you have somewhat the intersection of legitimate law enforcement practices and surveillance investigations, if you will, as well as balancing that and ensuring that you don't violate, in doing those things, that you don't violate the First Amendment, and even more so the Kendrick consent decree, which the court entered into, or the city entered into back in 1978. And so it's interesting because there's not necessarily a go-by where we can look at this city or this community or this police department and say, we'll just adopt what they're doing. In fact, one of the things Judge McCollum has made clear that hopefully when we get through this process, that we can be, and this community can be a model as to others when they deal and grapple with, again, 21st century policing as opposed to what this looked like back in 1978. So that is the charge that we have. That's kind of a backdrop of what we're doing and where we're headed. Somebody may have the question, how long will this last? Well, that's completely up to the court. This will last and be, and I say this, meaning the consent decree will be in place as long or until or unless the court modifies it or ends it. So that's not our call. Again, as the monitor, we're just that, monitoring and providing and being eyes and ears to the court, but ultimately this matter will be resolved and all the training and everything that we recommend may or may not be adopted by the court, but he's leaning on us. I'm leaning, and we're leaning on each other as experts or subject matter experts in various areas. I will tell you, when I assembled the team, I wanted the best and the brightest. And so, yes, we have an individual, Mr. McGriff, who's a part of the local law enforcement community and has experience in that regard. But everyone else is actually from outside of Memphis and Shelby County. And that was deliberate to make sure that if we're going to have an independent look and review, that we should have independent eyes with individuals that not only are qualified in this area, but have no vested interest outside of saying we want to get this right as we make our recommendations to the court. So at this point, and again, I want to make sure we have plenty of time, and we will, for questions. At this point, I want to turn it over, and I will ask the plaintiff in this case, the ACLU of Tennessee, if they would come up and again, just share any remarks or comments that they would like to. They just drove over from Nashville, so they made it on time. And it looks like Brandon Tucker, and also Mandy, wave your hand. Mandy Floyd is also an attorney for the ACLU, the plaintiffs in this case that involves the Kendrick consent decree. Brandon?
Mr. Thank you, Monitoring Team. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brandon Tucker, Policy Director for the ACLU of Tennessee. My remarks this evening are for this audience here and viewing online, not for the monitor, but from the ACLU of Tennessee to community members present here today and viewing here today. I'm grateful to be amongst you all and encouraged that this matter isn't only viewed as one between the Memphis Police Department and some of the community's strongest activists. Though Memphis Police Department's violation of the consent decree is what got us here today with a monitoring team seeking input from you all, these violations between MPD and activists goes beyond those who call them out. It affects the people outside of this room and community members throughout the city, whether they know it or not. The ACLU of Tennessee has advocated tirelessly in protection of the First Amendment rights through our work in legislatures and courts and communities. What we found time and time again is that those exercising the very right we continuously seek to protect have themselves fallen sacrificed even greater, and we thank you. Leaders and members of organizations that advocate for communities of color, organizations advocating for LGBT communities and immigrants' rights communities, people who testified to the court like Reverend and Dr. Earl Fisher, Paul Garner, Keatron Franklin, and Elaine Blanchard. They put themselves on the line. Individuals within this audience tonight, and those who cannot make it, and those who are viewing online. You all are the reason the ACLU of Tennessee works tirelessly to protect, in protection of our rights. So again, to reiterate what we're doing here today, is to correct violations of a consent decree established over 40 years ago. which prohibits the city of Memphis from engaging in law enforcement activities which interfere with any person's right protected by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Violations of our consent decree, spying on political protesters, collection of political intel, tracking activists, all a non-starter. The actions taken by Memphis Police Department can and most likely already have produced a chilling effect on those who choose to exercise their rights in the face of injustice. The right to mobilize, the right to walk into City Hall freely, to organize in the streets or online. The people of Memphis cannot feel emboldened to activate around the city's most pressing issues with the knowledge of or fear of being spied upon. That's what a chilling effect is. The instant you question the appropriateness of exercising your freedoms. This is what the monitoring team must combat. The team is independent, separate from the city, separate from us, separate from the police department. We ask for them. They are accountable to the court and to the community. Today, what they need is to hear from you. What can you do to help? What are your experiences? Their team has legal experts, public policy and First Amendment experts, social media experts, and law enforcement. But what we know and what the monitoring team should know is that the people who live this day-to-day have a lifetime of experience as well. This room and online viewers are experts. I believe the monitoring team is fully aware that your trust must be earned. This is about how you want to be policed. And if you're skeptical, be vocal. And as the monitoring team works to oversee new departmental policy, ensure that officers are trained properly, trying to ensure compliance with the consent decree, the monitoring team should have you all in mind. I close with this. The consent decree is not too broad because our constitutional rights are vast. And it isn't up to the Memphis Police Department or anyone else to experiment with strategies to chip away at them. This is an opportunity for MPD to regain trust, an opportunity to rebuild relationships, and we require respect for our freedom of movement and our freedom of speech. The continued role of the ACLU of Tennessee is to work within the community in building from recent legal victories. Our hope is to work with you following municipal elections. Your elected officials should be listening to you as well and asking themselves if they are doing their part to protect your rights, to ensure your communities aren't surveilled in a discriminatory manner, and to contribute to a more holistic view of how the city's police department should be serving its city. I thank Mr. Stanton, the monitoring team, and all of you here in this room and online. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. All right, and next we'll hear from a representative from City Memphis Police Department. I believe that's going to be Chief Don Crow. Chief Crow.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. Thank you, monitoring team. I am Deputy Chief Don Crow with the Memphis Police Department. Here with me tonight is Deputy Chief Paul Wright. We do want to share with you that we are cooperating with the monitoring team. We want to continue to cooperate with them. We look forward to their guidance, their input. We look forward to their review of our training, our policies, and for making improvements where it's needed. So we do want to continue, make our command staff and all of our officers and all of our records available to you.
Thank you, Chief Crow. And I will tell you, as I mentioned to Judge McCullough at the first status hearing that I mentioned, up until this point, we have had cooperation from the City of Memphis through its legal team and command, Director Rollins and command staff. There have been, again, thousands of pages that we have requested for review. And there have been a number of items, quite frankly, we've disagreed with the city upon, but they've been respectful of the process to this point. And so, Chief Crow, we appreciate that. I'd also be remiss, I introduced our illustrious monitoring team, but also we have two of my colleagues, two attorneys with the firm I practice with, Butler Snow. One of my partners, Will Peary. Again, Will has done a phenomenal job with assisting us with the team, and, excellent work, as well as Chanel Tyler. So our associate, she's also an attorney with the firm. As you can see, a very diverse team that's been working on this over the past 6.5, 7 months, the monitoring team itself. Again, for those that have just come in, we are streaming this live stream for those that can't be here this evening, so just keep that in mind. But at this point, again, you've heard from me, but we're here to field questions. We're here to provide any input, and again, to be as transparent as legally possible that we can. So I'm going to open it up, and we'll have a mic. And the reason we need you to speak into the mic, our technical team says they need to make sure the folks that are streaming online as they're capturing this can hear the questions. You don't have to give us your name or any information if you would prefer not to do so. I would ask again that you keep in mind the purview and the confines that we have been given by the court as to what our role is in our job. So it's not we are monitoring the Memphis Police Department, but it's a specific area of the Kendrick consent decree. And again, to ensure that the MPD is not conducting political intelligence in violation of that decree. So I will open the floor up. And before I do that, I don't know, if anyone on the monitoring team, certainly we'll invite questions, but if someone on the monitoring team wants to add something, if I've left something out about what we've been doing at this point, by all means, you guys have a mic. We will open the floor. Mandy, and Mandy again is from Nashville, one of the lawyers for the ACLU. We'll come to you, sir, next.
I just have a quick, I have a quick suggestion that maybe somebody, whoever's best suited on your team, could go over what the provisions of the consent decree are, so that people in the room can have a really clear understanding of what is covered by the decree.
I'll tell you what, we can maybe pull that up. It's on the website, and I don't want to leave something out. So before we finish tonight, we'll see if we can get that, pull it up online and go through that, Mandy. But I want to make sure that we don't miss something. So give us just a moment. We'll get those exact points, point well taken, but I don't want to, unless somebody has it right on, pulled up right now. So give us just a moment to pull that up. Good question. I think, gentleman in the back.
Yes, I don't need a mic. No, yeah, actually you do. Just.
Need a mic so the people that's streaming live can hear you. So, yes, we get it.
Yeah, how you doing? My question is, what is the timeline for you guys, and if this is in your respective area, for you guys to meet with community members who actually been directly or vicariously affected by the violation of the Kendrick Law?
Okay, would you repeat the question just one more time, sir?
Yes, is there a timeline for the monitoring team to meet with community organizers or community members who have been directly or vicariously affected by the violation of the Kendrick Law?
Yeah, that's a good question, sir. The question is there a timeline for us to meet with members of the community directly or vicariously impacted by the consent decree? That is what we're doing now, and I will tell you, we got started in January, and before meeting with the community, we wanted to make sure we got our marching instructions from Judge McCullough first. We've had our first, report in federal court to him. And even before doing this, we had to check in with the court. We had put in our plan that we wanted to have a community engagement forum and forums. We wanted to have a website. We've done those things, but before we were able to do either of those, we had to get the approval of the court. So to answer your question, this is the first of what we believe be multiple community engagement forums. But in the meantime, and I keep referencing our website, MemphisPDMonitor.com, MemphisPDMonitor.com. We solicit input. You're welcome to email and provide input in that regard. But to answer your question, this is the first part of that process.
So there is no timeline.
A timeline?
There's no timeline.
It's up to the court. The court has not given us a timeline. I mentioned, you may not have been here, I mentioned earlier, this will go on as long or until or unless Judge McCullough modifies and tells us to stop doing what we're doing. And a part of what we're doing is what we're doing tonight.
I think what he's saying is you haven't reached out to anybody in the community
Right, he heard what I'm saying,
who was impacted by this, and this was scheduled like on the same day as a police review board meeting that happens on the same time every month. I don't know that this team put out a press release or did any real community outreach. I mean, look at this room. It should be.
All right, and the concern for those that may be online is saying that perhaps that this was deliberately set on a date when something else was going on, or that the press release didn't go out. I will tell you, we sent a press release out over a week ago. We sent another press release out early this week. We shared the press release with the ACLU, and I talked to the director. He said there are over 2,000 contacts, and they would make sure that they would disseminate that to their contacts, the plaintiffs here. And so again, I'm not sure that there's a perfect night, and if you feel that I'm not answering your question, I'm sorry? Okay. You said how long will this last? And with
I didn't ask that. I asked that you guys create a timeline.
To reach out to people like us.
People up there, and y'all create a timeline.
that's what we're doing tonight, sir.
It should have been done, is all I'm.
Well, and I will tell you that we work
I
at
didn't
the
get an
will.
invitation from y'all, I got an invitation from the ACLU. I don't have my card, I gave to every person I could at the last hearing a card. When I recall, the judge was pretty unhappy about your community engagement strategy, so.
We have a copy. You're welcome to look at the transcript, that you can find that online. But again, everything we've done, sir, and everything that we will do will have to be at the approval of the court. And so we cannot go out and solicit or do anything. We could not put up a website. We could not issue a press release. We could not have a community forum without giving Judge McCollum all of the details of what we wanted to do, when, where, and how. And so, again, this is tonight, I mean, again, this is an open forum, and I appreciate each of you being here and sharing your comments. Is it perfect? No, but again, we solicit your input. Is there a perfect night to do this? I'm not sure that it is, but that is, that's where we are with regard to community engagement. And I will mention again, this is the first of multiple events, so long as the court authorizes us to continue. I would welcome you to solicit, to provide the website that I keep mentioning. You mentioned transparency and access. There are the means that we're taking right now to stream this live. Those are the types of things that we are taking into account to make sure that the public is made aware. I think this gentleman here.
I don't necessarily believe that, and I believe you earnestly, wholeheartedly tried, but I don't think you necessarily registering what he was saying clearly. A lot of us, first and foremost, are very frustrated, especially of those who've been directly impacted by this decree and the violation of Memphis Police Department as it relates to. And so I think what my friend in the back, Paul, are asking is there an effort to reach out to those who are directly affected by this versus hosting these broad, general community events? Because we get enough of those from the mayor, we get enough of those from the city. I think we just need to know, and I'm on that list as well. I think we just need to know that there is going to be transparency even on your side, and we need to know whose side you guys are on. And we just need to have that understood in the beginning and not these glamorous events such as these, because we're not looking for another political press meeting. We're just looking for truth and transparency, because right now it doesn't look well, because there's a clerk meeting happening down the street about something that happened that should be monitored as well. And so we're wondering if you guys should be there, and we should be all there, or should everyone be here? I think the strategy could have been strategized a bit better, so that way the transparency that you guys want us to buy would have been more affordable.
I think they're on the police side.
Okay, I have a mic.
Wait, just a second. Let me just respond very briefly to the gentleman here. Again, we work for the court. The court issued an order and named the monitor. The court, there was a hearing that was open for the court. The media was there, and it's unfortunate. This is not my first time having a community forum. You can check my credentials and my reputation and record as it relates to community service and engaging the community even when it's not popular. As U.S. Attorney, again, I stand on my record. And so I invite and welcome the comments. They're not taken personally. But when we had a court hearing, I can tell you it was a fraction of the people here that was made public. And so that is that we can't force individuals to be here. I can tell you tonight's record, and this event was planned several weeks and months ago. But again, we could not announce anything until Judge McCollum made it and gave us the approval. We welcome your comments. I think I saw another hand. She's had a mic. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. My name is Barbara Burris, self-proclaimed activist here in Memphis. I wanted my comments to be directed directly to the ACLU lawyers and the monitoring team, if they like. But I want to give direct examples of what it is that we're going through with our social media accounts. To my left is Frank Gotti. Me and him are like brother and sister. We fight for justice together, and when we do our live videos, they're interrupted. Most of the time, right at 4 minutes, everything's cut. They're pixelated. We're not able to contact each other at all. Our notifications are being turned off daily. Our see first buttons are being turned off as well. Our friends, we have thousands of friends, a bunch of us have thousands of friends, and they can't reach us. We're hearing music in our backgrounds. Our homes are being monitored by actual police officers. And I wanted to know if this are things that the monitoring team is aware of and is in a violation of the decree.
So in this case, we received tens of thousands of pages of documents from the Memphis Police Department that our legal team reviewed. And so I'm very aware of the things that were happening by the Memphis Police Department. I'm so grateful that you were here to share those things with us. These are exactly the types of things that people in this room and people who are watching should bring to the monitoring team. Things that are, when things happen to you that need to be shared with the monitoring team that are related to surveillance. And a little later on, we're going to go through the consent decree so everyone knows exactly what's covered. Bring those things to the monitoring team. It is their job to listen to you and to be aware of what's happening in the community. So thank you.
Yes, and I'd also like to invite every last one of them to one of my 5 pages because I'm being monitored on at least 4, but I just had to make a new one last night. So I invite you all to send me a friend request, and then you'll get my lives and you'll see what it is exactly that I'm talking about.
I know we have another question, but one thing that I would recommend, I know we've heard a lot of, we've heard some statements about what we could or should be doing. I would recommend, because the ACLU, they were the plaintiffs in the case, right? And they brought the case. So I know people say we have a distrust or we have some concerns. But I would submit, and I would, if you were at the hearing, when Judge McCullough asked the question, tell us about the monitoring team, tell us the work that they're doing. You can ask Ms. Floyd here today, who is not biased, I don't think, and again, she's the plaintiff in this case. She lives in Nashville, about the work that we're doing and how we've been receptive to their input. And again, it's a lot of work that we're doing, but I'm proposing this as it relates to dates, as it relates to information. If you don't feel comfortable sending it to me or to the monitoring team or on the website, share that information with Ms. Floyd, with the ACLU. And they have a way, lawyer to lawyer, to get to us what we need. And again, go to someone you trust, and that's why we invited the ACLU to be here today. If you have concerns about what we're doing, speak to the counsel for the ACLU. And I think she and they will tell you directly what we've been doing over the past 6 to 7 months. Have we gotten it perfect? No. Are we where we're trying to get to? No. But I think we have done a yeoman's job with trying to make sure that we have captured the spirit of what Judge McCullough has asked us to do by being the monitoring team and making sure that the consent decree is not violated. So these specific instances, if you don't feel comfortable with sharing with us, if we don't know, we can't do anything about it. I also want to go back and make sure you understand that we have to only work within the purview. And so when you hear Memphis Monitor, that says something, but we have to and only can monitor what the court has given us instructions to do. We have to fall in line with what the court has told us to do. So again, I welcome you to share your comments, concerns, questions, any information that you don't feel comfortable sharing tonight, sharing online. How many of you all have been online? Okay, so that's good. And you will see there are 3 different ways that you can submit information. If you want to do it anonymously, you can mail it, if you can drop it off in my office, hand deliver it, or you can go on the website. In fact, we say that we recommend that email is the preferred method. And so again, we can't fix what we don't know, and we can't do anything outside the confines of what Judge McCullough has given us the authority to do. Who's next? Yes, sir.
I guess I have a question. So traditionally, it's the multi-agency gang unit that arrests activists. And that's a conglomeration of Memphis Police Department, Shelby County Sheriff, U.S. Marshals, FBI, TBI.
ICE.
I don't know, but all of them. So since the lawsuit is in regards to NPD, do y'all have access to all the multi-agency gang unit files since it falls under several different law enforcement agencies? Since they're the ones that seem to be targeting us and arresting us.
And I guess you're, from a political intelligence standpoint, is that?
Yes.
And we know that the sheriffs aren't just doing, NPD's work for them.
I mean, almost every time I'm Hunter Dempster, by the way. Almost every time I've been arrested, it's been by the multi-agency gang unit, and same with Keith and a lot of the rest of it. So I'm just curious if y'all even have access to the necessary information.
That's how they hide.
Now, look on his face.
Can he answer the question?
When you say access to the information, I want to, so let me be clear. Tonight, we want to hear, and I appreciate you sharing this. So we are listening, we're taking notes with regard to the concerns. And our goal is, again, to ensure that the MPD is not violating the consent decree.
Okay, well, let me like give an example for a story that's happened this month, in which would have been important to meet with the activists who were directly affected. Like, I don't know if this falls under political intelligence. So I'm at my house where I'm registered at. I'm kind of off in a cut smoking a cigarette. I see a unmarked police car that's about 10 to 15 years old pull up in front of the house, stop in front of the driveway. The police officer doesn't see me, so I walk out in the yard, and I have it all on camera. And I ask him, I'm like, what are you doing? And he gets out of his car, comes on my property, and tells me he's looking in my neighbor's driveway. But he's parked directly in front of my driveway. It seemed very inappropriate and caught me off guard. You can imagine in light of this federal lawsuit. So we do a FOIA request to get his duty log. The official response is he's off duty. But he's in full organized crime unit, multi-agency gang unit gear. A month goes by, I talk about it for the very first time on social media in the comment thread of a post. The next day, we get a phone call that says, oh, we made a mistake, he was on duty. The duty log that I got, it has fresh ink, chicken scratch, that does not match the rest of the duty log. Is that political surveillance, or is that police intimidation? Are they one and the same?
So, let me just say this. Share that information. This is the first, we can't do anything.
This is my first opportunity, like you said.
And that's, I'm glad someone's taking advantage as opposed to sharing the information. We can't do anything if we don't know about the concerns that you're voicing.
I will send you all those documents, the video, and everything. And that's just one example.
And so to answer your question, is that political intelligence? Possibly. I don't want to tell you it is. I can't tell you that it isn't without knowing more facts. But we can't do anything as a monitoring team without input from the community. And so this is the first session tonight. We're looking for solutions. And so again, if you can share with us, and again, and I keep going back to, if you don't feel comfortable sharing it with me, share it with counsel for the ACLU. Does anyone have a problem sharing it with the counsel for the ACLU? They're the plaintiffs. I'm just, and sir, I'm asking you to share that with me. And I'm saying if you don't share that with me, if you don't feel comfortable, you have another avenue.
I would like Mark to say who's as upset as me. Y'all up there cool and chill about this. This is our lives. We the monitors saying who mad as we are. We need people from this community on the monitors saying. That's right. Y'all not affected by this. I am. I got PTSD. I can't sleep at night. That's right. Y'all don't. Y'all sleep well at night.
I see another hand here. Yes, sir.
Y'all scream and trust y'all, but like at the end of the day,
Yeah, get the mic.
like Keisha just said, y'all scream and trust y'all, but y'all don't know what we go through. Like on straight up and down, just being real. Like we out here every day. Really, to be honest with you, most of us are doing the job that the police doing. We're trying to bring a solution to this crime, to these kids dying, and we still like me and my brother be on the phone discussing like, hey, let's push over to this crime scene. We just heard Lil Ray Ray just got killed. Our phones are cut off. And he'll call me back like, hey, what happened to your phone? I'm like, man, my phone's in cut off. I ain't touched no button. It's like everything. Like if they done it once, they'll do it twice. So y'all saying trust y'all, what's different from them screaming trust them?
And sir, I understand your concern, and I say, if you don't trust me, yes, we're saying trust me.
Trust is earned. Like,
Okay.
it's just
And I'm
that
saying
simple.
until we earn your trust, sir, I would welcome you to share with someone that I believe everyone raised their hand or didn't raise their hand, said who does not trust the ACLU attorney here. They're the people, they're one of the reasons why we're in this room today, because they brought a
Keith
lawsuit.
said, like the things we go through, pretty much everybody in this room who pushed, who's been labeled or active or consider themselves active, we call vitamins. Like you just said, y'all cool, man. Like y'all, it's not a bar. Like you just said, we want people that know that this ain't right. We want people that know that, hey, we wouldn't take a stand for you. You know what I mean? Come on, just screaming it and don't mean it. Hey, it's a waste of time. Like you saying, trust you, but what like you said from the beginning of this meeting, you said y'all have done a lot and got a lot coverage of what y'all have been y'all been covering. But at the end of the day, if you know what you've been covering and you see what's going on, this meeting here should have been when they just brought up the situation with Barbara Burris getting tackled by police officers. Like, come on, you're gonna be real, don't come halfway, come all the way correct.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
First of all, I just want to recognize the intensity right now that's in this room. And just second what people have said. You know, the people that are raising their voices right now are not doing it because they like to do it. Right? They're not Facebook warriors. They're real people who've been affected in real ways for a long time in the city. The consent decree is older than most of the people in this room. This is a long tradition. My name is Tony DeVelasco. I'm a professor of political rhetoric. I mentored a student who actually did an entire project on this. It was an honors project. And I'll share it with the group. He has a whole timeline of political surveillance in this city. But let's keep it to the decree. First of all, how does the decree define political? And how do you interpret what it says? Because I think those are two very different questions. What does it say, and how do you all interpret it? Because most of what I hear when the police department talks about why they've done these things seems to me to play very delicate games with the name, with the idea of political surveillance. So what does it say, and how do you interpret it? Because words don't speak for themselves.
This is Jim Lennon here. I don't, admittedly, right now, I do not have the consent decree printed before me. We're operating off of it. That's our mission, is to ensure that this police department operates, collects evidence, carries out law enforcement within the confines of and the restrictions of that consent decree. Political intelligence, and I'm telling you, this is from someone, if I may, sir. Political intelligence is something completely different from collecting evidence of crimes, evidence of possible danger to citizens. Political intelligence, in essence, is the collection or gathering of information, whether that's communications of individuals, whether that's the activities of individuals, whether that's the identities of individuals, for a purpose that falls outside a legitimate law enforcement purpose. So let's say for a political end, for a political or ideological end. It is something that we in the United States, whether it's the military, whether it's federal law enforcement, local, state law enforcement, any government, we are precluded from collecting against U.S. persons or against individuals in this country to the extent that it does interfere, and if we collect it for political purposes, it is not consistent with the First Amendment of the Constitution. It can interfere with First Amendment rights in terms of communication, in terms of ideology, etc. So, for instance, if a department, a police department, collects the names of individuals that individuals in that department believe are ideologically, let's say they just don't like their ideological positions. Let's say they don't like their politics. Let's say that they're uncomfortable with the activities of that person politically, and they want to be able to surveil that person, find out what that person's doing, and perhaps interfere with that person's exercise of those rights. Political intelligence is that kind of conduct that no law enforcement entity, no government subdivision in the United States has a right to collect, to gather, to use. And what our goal is, our mission, it's not just our goal, our mission is to work with the ACLU, to work with the department, to work with the police department of the city, and to work, as Ed said, as Mr. Stanton said, the eyes and ears of the court, not to do internal investigations, not to do enforcement, to make certain that going forward, that this department is able to protect public safety, is able to gather intelligence of actual criminal conduct, and not do it at the expense of anyone's First Amendment rights, and not gather information or intelligence that you have a right to expect privacy regarding, that you have a to collect information that involves your beliefs, your ideology, etc. We have to make sure that that occurs. We have to protect constitutional rights, and we have to do it without degrading or harming their ability to keep you and your children and your neighbors safe. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I had the mic first. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Let me. My name is Jay Worth. I represent GKP, a multimedia company here in the city, as well as I'm concerned with a lot of these things. The first thing I'll say, sir, with respect to you, to be on a board and to stand before people and to say you don't even know the decree that you're talking about is a problem. Sir, I didn't interrupt you. Let me say this with respect to you. And let me say this. There's a such thing, first off, there's a professional way. And for you to have this be the inaugural whatever meeting that you're going to have, the last thing I will probably say is I don't know what I'm here to discuss.
I didn't say that.
And you said you did. You couldn't quote it. Let me leave that though. Let me leave that because I think the problem is, first off, when you talk about building trust, and I've heard a lot of the people speak here, the thing about it is, you brought it up and now it's developed. A lot of times the community, like my brother earlier spoke, does not know anything about it till you pop it up or till you have these impromptu meetings in an hour and a half, what can you really get done, and how it's like y'all have these things privatized. You want to build trust, but there's nobody from the community sitting on this board. There's nobody from the community on the ACLU board. When is the community going to really be involved outside of being invited to meetings to listen to y'all tell us what we already know is going on? When is there going to be the meetings where people actually have a voice, have a position? There should be some community people sitting up there. There should be some people from the community. When you had focus groups to develop this, you should have involved some of the community people. And I think that's a problem. If you want to build trust, then you have to be fully transparent. Don't just be transparent behind the closed doors, but have focus group meetings with the community prior to making up things like this that you disguise as being able to help the community when we never really see the help.
Or refer back to the court, or the court did this and the court did that. I have been where it's been many cases where we've been to the Supreme Court, and I sat on review boards like this. You guys are all police department. Police retired officers, you gave all your backgrounds, this and that. We know you guys work hand in hand. Not one of you guys up there mentioned anything about the community. Like what brother just said. Mention something about the community.
Because me personally, I don't trust the police. Me personally, I know everybody in this room don't trust the police. MGU, multi-gang unit itself, have a raid in my grandma and my uncle's house on the same street. And during the lawsuit, all of them has skulls on. And you know what the gang unit officer told me? Oh, we the biggest gang in the city. Oh, we don't have to reveal our identity to you. We can do what we want to do. So when you bring that to the community and you create that fire in the community, that's why we fight back and organize like the way we do. You have to build trust. There's no trust in this room. There's no trust. And I want to say this. Quit putting it on the ACLU. The ACLU is here to represent the community.
We the ones who fake, not
Right.
ACLU.
Thank you.
All your points are well taken. I want to go back to something you said, sir, very succinctly. And I will welcome you. I will welcome you. You mentioned something about focus groups. You mentioned something about getting community, people from the community engaged. We would like to hear from you. Can I count on you to pull a group of community members together?
Matter of fact, I'll leave my card with you. So you can contact me at any point in time.
Also, I'll put them on the board.
Sir.
That's all on it. Y'all
And let me,
My name is Adrian Ward. I've been listening patiently. Everybody here is making a whole lot of sense. Mr. Stanley.
excuse me, 1 second, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. All right, thank you for your
I'm sorry.
time.
The reason I want this thing on, keep dwelling on the monitors. The decree is just focused on one specific area. And I find it a little troubling. I understand your narrow focus, but what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm an officer and I'm assigned to homicide, and I see while doing this homicide, I see a robbery, I'm supposed to ignore it. So when you say your narrow focus, you looking through all these files for this decree violation. And if you see other violations, like, let me be clear, not just with activists, but with just citizens, you can see that too when you're looking, are you looking at deep? When you're looking for these violations of this 40-year decree. Let me say everything while I got the mic. Also, you addressed the fact that the gentleman was saying all these things happening, different things that's happening with these phones, computers. All of that can be verified and found followed. So if they are doing this and you've been assigned to this, you can find out this. And that's a fact, a scientific electronic fact. So are you finding these facts out? That's what I would like to know.
Thank you, sir, for the question. I'll see you next. I want to be clear what we've been instructed by the court to do. And I know people say you blame it on the court. Again, this is a federal court judge, and we cannot be in contempt or violation of what he's told us to do and what we can do. To your point about have we gone and have we found these violations, the court has instructed us going forward, and part of the sanctions for the city is that the city must come up with new training, new procedures, new protocol, new definition for political intelligence. It's all on our website, but to make sure that going forward, they don't go back and violate the consent decree. The court has not instructed us to go back and look at files or go back and look at who may have been on a list. The court has instructed us the language going forward. Every officer that's trained, whether it's through a video, whether it's through written materials, that he's leaning on the monitoring team to say, we want to make sure that no officer could say, I didn't know about the consent decree. That was one of the things, if you look at the order, and what the court said is, it wasn't sure that many of the members of the police department were intentionally trying to violate the consent decree. Quite frankly, it appears the court said many didn't even know there was a decree or the tenets of the decree were in place. And so what the court, I want to be clear, what the court has instructed us to do is the policies, the training, the manual, the procedures, video surveillance. When can you go on social media? Those things where someone can't say, well, we didn't know, and what can we do, what can't we do? And we have someone to make sure going forward, and again, I can only tell you when we got involved with this, so the court did not tell us to go back and review. That trial, sir, and it's already happened last year. The court has ruled that the city violated. The court ruled that there were certain tactics and fake Facebook accounts and things of that nature. But I want to be clear, what we have not, that's not in our lane, that's not something we have the authority to go back and look at any files to this point. I will say again, we can't fix what we don't know about. We can't even address and look to see if that's in our lane. And so again, this is helpful. The gentleman just gave me his card, and I appreciate those that are talking about solutions. I gave him my word that if he could get a group together, we will have a focus group. That is a part of what we told the court we would do, so it wouldn't just be the ACLU, it wouldn't just be tonight's audience, but that if you want to meet, if you have something to share, we're looking for solutions, but I'm not going to promise something that either we can't do or we have not been charged with doing. This gentleman here, and I see you, Greg.
Yeah, I have a question for the gentleman who spoke last on the panel. Based on what you were describing as your understanding of what's required under the decree, excuse me. So my question is it the board, the panel, or the independent monitor's position that the protections under the decree are coextensive with those already granted under the First Amendment? Because my reading of Judge McCullough's ruling is contrary to that.
And first of all, when you say coextensive, are you asking if you believe the First Amendment guarantees are precisely the same as those guaranteed under the consent decree? Because quite frankly, the consent decree was crafted by the court to protect the exercise of First Amendment rights. The consent decree parameters and the order is actually, by its nature, designed to be and is broader than just narrowly protecting First Amendment rights.
That's my question.
Yes.
So does it provide more protections than those granted by the First Amendment?
And the short answer to that is yes. To the point of the consent decree goes further than first. I think that's what you're asking.
Yes.
I think we've come to you once, right? Not yet. Okay, I'm sorry. I had to make those earlier. I want to make sure we'll circle back. I want to get this.
Hi, I'm Charlie Belenke. I got two questions. The first one's a short question, and the second one's a long question. The first question is, are you willing to look at evidence of new violations of the consent decree, or is that outside the purview?
No, absolutely. If anyone has information that the Memphis Police Department is violating the consent decree, absolutely, that is information that we would like to share with us.
Every day we have evidence.
If you have information, you can go to our website. You can see how you can share that information with us. Yes, if it is the opinion that the consent decree is still being violated, please share that information.
My next question is more in terms of a speech, and I'm sorry, we all hate people who make speeches in the form of a question. So I believe, at least it is my perception, that the citizenry in this town are occupied by the police, that we exist in a state of intimidation and terror. For example, on Father's Day, about 24 clergy showed up in front of City Hall to pray for the community. There had been a shooting, and the police responded with dozens of police officers and tanks. They had tanks around the corner because the clergy were dangerous, or because it's part of a pattern to intimidate the citizenry. Now, the surveillance that we're talking about here, which is the only thing within your purview, is part of the occupation, is part of the terrorizing of the citizenry. And we're here because we want justice, because we want to see an end to that. But what I'm hearing from you is that that is outside your purview. That the police pulling people over randomly, shooting people for no reason, terrorizing the community is outside your purview. You're only concerned with whether they're engaging in surveillance that is contrary to the consent decree. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Then there's no justice in this room. Thank you.
Attorney Sanders, if you're hearing of current and present violations of the consent decree, who would vet them to find out if they are bona fide, as people say they are? How would that change then the mission of the monitor?
Great question, Mr. Coy. So first and foremost, we can't address anything that we don't know about. Should we receive information along the lines of what you're talking about, who would vet that? That would be the individuals here, the attorneys that are also with me that I mentioned earlier. We give a report to the court every quarter. I welcome everyone to see what we've done and what we've reported to the court. There's been some things that we've agreed with the city and the ACLU. Quite frankly, there's some other things that we have not agreed upon. But to answer your question about who would change and how the mission may change based on this information that we receive, whether it's tonight or going forward, that would be Federal District Court Judge John McCollum. He's the person that was the sole arbiter or hearing the judge in the trial last year. He's the individual who said, I'm going to make the sanctions. Not Ed Stanton, not anyone on this team, but it was the judge who said, these are the things that I'm going to hold the city accountable for violating this decree. One of those items was I want to appoint someone and a team of individuals to be the eyes and ears to report back to me going forward that we make sure that the city does not violate this decree again. So that's the lane that we're in. But ultimately, Greg, that would be Judge McCollum.
And if there is a concern that the documents that you're getting only are from one law enforcement agency, when others have said that they were politically surveilled by other agencies within the county, the state, or the city, does the monitor have the right to ask for those documents?
Great question, and I'm glad you asked. That is outside, the judge only references the consent decree that the Memphis Police Department entered into. No other state, federal, or local law enforcement agency. That would be outside of my purview. Until or unless the judge gives me the authority. I'm not sure how many of you all have been to federal court. Those are lifetime appointments. But you can be held in contempt if you do something. I call it if you want to get cute and go outside of the confines. But until or unless the judge, you know how this goes, Greg, gives us more or expands authority. Right now, we're solely focused on, laser focused on the Memphis Police Department and ensuring they don't violate the decree. Could it change? Absolutely. That would be left up to the judge. Whether he does that or not, that's up to the court.
So have you guys found any violations to go to the judge to ask for?
And sir, that's what I've been saying, and I'll try to make it clear again. Tonight, I've heard a lot of information, but if you want to share information, that's what we're requesting tonight. If you don't feel comfortable doing it tonight, I'm not dumping on the ACLU. Many individuals said they don't trust talking to me, and again, I will stand behind each and every individual on this team. I'm a member of this community, so when someone says, hey, wait a minute, I'm a product of this community. And when you say that everybody's from out of town and we're not going to get loud, we are independent, and that means what it says. We're not taking one side or the other. We report to the court. To answer your question, sir, again, send us information. We will vet it, as Greg Coy said, and we will determine whether or not it violates, and we will put that in our report. We will be the eyes and ears of the court, and he will direct us as to next steps. If we need more information from the city, again, I told you we've gotten thousands of pages of documents. There's a weekly communication that's going on. We've met with individuals. We have the authority to do real-time, unannounced visits, audits, compliance. That is a part of our job. But I can't stress enough, if we don't know and if you don't share with us what you're talking about, again, not in the past, that's not what the court has given us the authority to do, but going forward to ensure that these protections are not being violated. So can I trust and lean on you? If you have that information, please share it with me. If you don't feel comfortable sharing it with me, I can't do anything about it. We can't do anything about it. Again, I would recommend, I hate to keep leaning on Mandy, but again, I think there is some trust level that they've identified that they are impartial, if you will, and they have a trust factor. Mandy, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I think somebody else that had not, sir, you had, okay, we'll go here and here, but Mandy.
So when the consent decree was drafted and agreed to by the city, the parties negotiated specifically about whether the Memphis Police Department could use another agency to violate the decree. And the consent decree says that it cannot. So that is written into the decree. And so that's just a point of clarification.
let me just follow up, and I'm coming back there. And I want to make sure we keep in context when Mr. Levin mentioned, he said, I don't know, he was quoting, I can't quote right now, he didn't want to go off the cuff, but I will read that language so we can be clear as far as the definition when we're talking about political intelligence in the consent decree. It is, quote, gathering, indexing, filing, maintenance, storage, or dissemination of information or other investigative activity relating to any person's beliefs, opinions, associations, or other exercise of First Amendment rights. So I think, again, Jim, he got it right, but he didn't quote it from here, and I just want to go back and clean that up as far as the starting point for political intelligence and the actual definition that's referenced in the decree.
I don't think we need a political intelligence definition. I think the problem is.
Well, that was one of the questions, sir, that was asked, and I'm going to, sir, I'm going to add, sir.
It wasn't. We're here because MPD is fraudulently attaching their purpose to spy on us with crime.
And if you have specific examples, sir, you can share them with us.
Examples are because we're here. We're here. MPD is spying on us and using crime and attaching crime to our resumes.
If you can give us
a reason to.
And sir, I'm going to ask that you be respectful of the process. There are other individuals. We've heard your comments.
This meeting is becoming a waste of time. It's becoming a waste of time. Nothing's getting done.
And I have one question for you, sir. If you would put in writing the information that you want to share that the MPD is violating the consent decree, we would ask you to do. Is that asking too much, sir?
I think it needs to be put in writing that MPD is breaking the law.
So
I think you guys are way too comfortable, way too casual, and this is not a comfortable meeting. I came with optimism. I came open, and this is giving me the biggest damn headache all day long. This is ridiculous.
So are you saying you're not going to put in writing the concerns that you have?
This meeting is not productive right now.
Sir, we're going to ask that you be respectful of other individuals that want to share and exercise their First Amendment rights and share their concerns. Yes, sir.
Yeah, First Nolan is the name. In September of last year, Facebook's general counsel wrote to Mike Rawlings saying that 6 accounts had been canceled because they were being used by MPD. And we know about Bob Smith or defective Tim Reynolds. Can you find out who the other 5 were and just put that on your site?
There are 6.
There were 6. We know 1. There were 6. Whatever. There's a certain number in excess of 5 out there, and you should be able to find out who they are, and we would like to know.
Thank you for the inquiry. We have our social media expert. She's taking that information.
One more thing. There's 2 pigs down here taking notes. Are they collecting political intelligence? If they're writing people's names down, they might be.
Right.
You know,
Can you check their notes and tell them not to be In fact, I'm very uncomfortable with pigs on the road. Anybody else uncomfortable with pigs on the road?
And let me say this. I will ask them that if it's the will of this body to have them excused, I will ask them to.
Can they go? Can they leave?
They can leave unless they want to.
Can you take their?
Okay. And to this point of transparency, Chief Crow said he's happy to share his notes. To manage. Okay. Well, no, they don't. I want somebody that maybe they.
And just another point of clarification, this is the monitor's meeting today, and it was the ACLU's intent to give the monitor the opportunity to approach the community independent of our involvement. And so I just want that to be clear in this meeting, that I am always very happy to hear from each and every one of you about what's happening in the city of Memphis, but that is also what the monitor is here to hear about. So I just want that to be clear. And it's just no, sorry, I'm a little uncomfortable about being asked to do this. Yeah, if you would do it
All right, so it says degree drafted, it says MPD cannot use another law enforcement agency, which is suspect to me. Read consent decree out loud portion. Meeting is a waste of time
Thank you for acknowledging that, Crow.
Team way too casual, meeting not productive. We see how he feels about y'all's meeting.
What's on the previous page, Hunter? Previous page.
In September last year, FB wrote to Director Rawlings that they canceled 6 accounts. One was Bob Smith, who was over 5. So they're not taking the meeting serious either.
What's on the previous page, Hunter?
Okay, we are, I want to make sure that we get to the individuals we hadn't had a chance to speak. I know you, ma'am, we've been waiting. And so I think the question, sure, you had is whether or not the police department was surveilling and taking names and numbers. We just read the notes that Chief Crow asked their members. And the question was whether or not they should or could be excused and they have. Yes, ma'am. Come back to you, sir. Come back to you, sir. Filings to the court, where you'll see comes to the court, where you'll see so that's what you go to the website, you will find, so certain questions align, you will find where the city has a recommendation by the nation, where it has a recommendation, and the body is giving a recommendation to the court, goes further than what the city's requesting. Goes further than what the city's requesting. Sir.
A couple questions. Bills and what intelligence to evade police, what intelligence to evade police under this decree.
It is collecting police evidence, collecting agencies and accountability to evade things that were said by people who are saying was that behavior violation was that collecting intelligence to evade police intelligence to evade.
I believe the answer is yes to that. Can you give me an example? I believe the answer is yes to that.
You're a member of Black Lives Matter and things that are least held accountable. And that is the case of consent decree. That is what happens against consent. That would be no SRP. That would be no SRP. No order reports outside area. Again, if you're aware of that information, yes, if you're aware of that kind of experts on license plate. We said we have experts on CMC. We still do there is unsold use of facial recognition. We have huge infrastructure built up capabilities that the police have never shared that extend beyond just those things that extend beyond just use of social media. Those capabilities and monitoring those capabilities and over those capabilities.
Good question. I will allow the social media. Good question. I will allow the social media to that is language so important. The language that's being addressed in the work that you're doing, the work that the ACLU expectations, but whether or not the city is made right. To your point, what governs, right? To your point, you got to know, right? What you're going to violate, you got to know that is the process, right? So that is, you can't do this overnight. That is why it's you can't do this overnight.
Of information.
And I would welcome, if you go to the,
because we don't know.
and if you go to the website, and your point's well taken, sir, and I would submit, if you go to the website, you can see.
Two more quick points.
Let me finish that, because you mentioned something, you said it will be very helpful and very transparent. I would welcome you to go to the website. You will see line by line exactly what we've done at this point, what the recommendations of
I'm
the
just
court.
giving my recommendations for what you do to make this something fruitful for the citizens of Memphis.
And we're
as
taking
the Justice Department did it in Ferguson to help show what really happens. That's what people really want to see happen. Two other points. Policy. Policy is based on law. The police will always say our policy follows the law. Will you map the laws that need to be changed, but that they're using to set these policies that have resulted in violations? We need to know. There's no other way for us to know. Third question, when you say that you're after just police intelligence, that's the targeting system for the misdemeanor.
Let me be clear. I'm not saying that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that's what the court has told
You
us.
repeatedly said that's the four corners you have to live in. That is the targeting system for the misdemeanor arrests and citations that are rained down on the people to deter their use of the First Amendment. They are both together. I do not see how it can ever be satisfying for you to try to separate the two and say you'll just tell us about the policies and procedures for the targeting system and take no look at all about the results of the shots fired. If you track the shots fired, you find out about the targeting system. We'd like to see both.
And your point's well taken. I would say to your language, the shots fired. If you have information, we can't address something that we don't know about. Yeah, and so again, we can talk in generalities, but if you have specific.
You just said the shots fired are outside your purview in answer to my question.
Okay, but my point, sir, if I could be a little bit more clear, if you're saying, as this gentleman said, that it impacts and that indeed there's a direct correlation with political intelligence.
You keep bringing it back to the individual experience.
That's what we've been instructed to do.
We collectively have individual experience of a lifetime in a city with a history, and we can talk to you beyond our individual experiences. What we're saying is we're looking for some way to have this system actually work for us. And you keep telling us that's not my job.
Well, let me just start here. Why don't you, I welcome you to look at the court's order. I know it seems like that's a default, but I can.
I understand that.
Yeah,
I understand
and so if you're asking me to defy the court's order and do something more than what he's told me to do, sir, I'm sorry.
I'm just describing to you the frustration here. And I'll just tell you, personally, I was awakened last November when I was arrested at the mall for taking a picture of a young man being arrested at the mall for wearing a hoodie. That got me interested. And it all ties together. It all goes back to the same thing. Is holding police accountable a use of political intelligence? Is using political intelligence to target people who are holding police accountable? These are the things we need to have changed. And we hope, we pray that instead of another monitor, I don't know how much this is costing, but that we actually get something like the Ferguson report, which laid bare the system and gave people something to work with and act upon. That's why we pay tax dollars for things like this. Thank you.
And I appreciate your comments. And in our report, I will say this, that's not going where blind eyes being turned or deaf ear to what you are saying. As you relate, I'm a product of the Department of Justice. I worked under Attorney General Holder and Lynch. In the past, excuse me, we brought the COPS program as it relates to the Memphis Police Department from a community trust standpoint. There have been a number of issues that we heard loud and clearly, and so during my 10 years U.S. Attorney, again, I stand on my record and reputation for my commitment to justice and my commitment to the rule of law. But at the same time, again, that may not be what you want to hear, but I cannot violate a court order. I can share with the court your sentiments, sir. And if the court is the will of the court to expand or tell us to do otherwise, so it's not going on, again, I'm not turning a blind eye. And you won't find anyone more committed to the issues that you're talking about. But again, I have to stay within the confines of the purview of the consent decree. Is there someone else that we have not heard from? I see a few more hands, and I know we're getting close toward the end. We'll welcome the additional questions. I see one in the back. I do want to turn it over to, that's all, Rachel.
Sure, but I'm happy to let folks speak, and I just had a few thoughts I wanted to share, but I'm happy to defer first to community members here.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm sorry if this question has already been asked, but I also just wanted to say that I don't think that justice is just for people who can read, and I don't think that justice is just for people who can access the internet. So when people in this room are asking you questions and you're referring them back to the website, I don't really find that appropriate. And I wish that you would be more explicative with your response instead of telling people to go to the website.
Okay. Very good point. Let me just say this, very good point. And maybe I was misunderstood. I say that from an abundance of time, but I do want to, along those lines, something I promised Mandy, who I think may have stepped out, she had a question of the areas of coverage. Also to your point, those that may not be able to, you said read or write correct, and so that is one of the reasons why we
Access the internet.
Access the internet,
That
yes.
is a justice issue.
Okay. But one of the things that Mandy, I told her we would do, one of the questions she had, I think the first question that she had, and that was the areas of coverage of the consent decree. So I do want to follow up and answer that inquiry. First, it prohibits electronic surveillance for political intelligence. We've talked about that quite a bit this evening. Prohibits court surveillance for political intelligence. Prohibits harassment and intimidation of people exercising their First Amendment rights. Another tenet, it sets the limits on criminal investigations that may incidentally interfere with First Amendment rights. And Mandy, this is appropriate time. I'm going through those, your first question, those items of the consent decree, the areas of coverage. Fifthly, it sets limits on the MPD's ability to maintain and share information. And last but not least, it limits joint operations between MPD and other law enforcement. So when you say, well, what's the confines, or what are we talking about in the consent decree? That is what the city agreed that they would not do and that would not violate, and that is what the court has ordered after a trial last year, that that's indeed what the city, through the police department, they did. But your point, ma'am, is very well taken. You're right, everyone does not have access to the internet, and we're trying our best. Everyone doesn't have access to come here this evening, and so that's why, again, we live streamed it. We have, we will archive, we plan to archive this first session to make sure those that want to assess what's going on, they have that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that they were asking very direct questions that honestly I feel like I have to ask this a similar question because they didn't get an answer to their question. So I'm wondering if when people in the community are being stalked by police officers, when they're being tailed by police officers, when they have off-duty police officers sitting outside of their houses, I'm wondering, does that fall within the list of things, like when I listen to the list that you just read off, like I could interpret it that way. I certainly think that that's a huge violation of people's rights because it's happening because people are speaking out politically. And so I want to know, is that something that should be reported, and is that something that's going to be addressed?
I would say this, if you believe that, like you said, you have an interpretation of what I just read, if you believe that those things are happening and it's in violation of this decree, yes, I can't underscore it enough. Please contact and make us aware, make this team aware. Again, whether it's email, whether it's written, whether it's mail, yes, that is something that we have, I believe, a duty to look and vet to determine whether or not, again, the Memphis Police Department is violating the decree. And if that is your belief that that's happening, I've said it a number of times tonight, please, we can't fix or address those instances that we aren't aware of. So yes, please share that information.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think it should be. Like, I don't know if it is, but I think that it should be.
Thank you. Rachel, let me see what, I think I see one, maybe a couple more hands, and I do want to get to those individuals, but our social media.
Yeah, this will be quick. So I think some of the frustration kind of, for me, feels like it's coming from, this feels sort of like another purely complaint-driven process. And so I think maybe what people, or what might put us a little bit more at ease is to know that this process is not purely complaint-driven, but that there's a proactive strategy to get at things that we may not know is happening to us. I mean, during the course of this lawsuit, many of us learned for the first time, many journalists learned for the first time that they were on a list of people being surveilled. I knew I was under surveillance. I did not know the extent of it, or that, you know, the police director was going to try to investigate me for identity theft for making a satirical Twitter account. So there are things I don't know about. How are you guys getting access to the things that we might not know about? I know you said that you can do random drop-in visits. Have any of those been conducted? How many of those? And how do we get to things that there isn't really a way we could maybe know we're experiencing, like Stingray surveillance. We know the city of Memphis has had renewed contracts in the past with the Harris Corporation that manufactures Stingray. So these are the kinds of things I think we don't want to feel like it's all on us to make this process work, because we already pretty much have that process with police accountability as it is in Memphis. And a lot of us are burned out and exhausted and beaten down and tired. And so, we want a monitor team that's going to be proactive, I think is what might be what people are trying to communicate.
And I appreciate your remarks. And I can hear the spirit in what you're saying, sir. I think it's a collaborative effort. We can't do it on our own. And I know you're saying we shouldn't have to just lean on you and the community to say, but I think it's a collaborative effort. And so what I'm suggesting, again, if you can share that information. We don't have the authority, and I mentioned this earlier, but I'll say it again, to go back and look at files. That's not what the court has instructed. He said, look at the language, look at the training, and look at the protocols and procedures that's in place to make sure that the city is not and will not violate the consent decree. That is what.
How do you know what you're looking for in the future if you don't look at what has been done in the past?
Well, that's a good question, but we have looked at what the court has already said. There's been a trial on this. How long was the trial?
But I mean, y'all were there for the trial.
But my point is that's already, the court has already ruled in that regard. And so I guess it sounds like maybe a duo.
I'm saying, what is that proactive process? What kind of access do you have to NPD's databases, and what kind of access do you have to their jibs that we saw our faces circulating that still exist on the internet? I got my goofy ass driver's license picture all over the damn internet forever now, because these smirking guys that already walked out of the meeting, thought that this stuff was okay.
Let me say this. If you're telling us, and again, we can go off record or offline or whatever.
You're kind of obfuscating what I'm asking is what do those proactive protocols look like? Or
Is this a purely complaint-driven process? I know what you're saying is it's a collaboration, but how do we know to tell you what we don't know? How can we know what we don't know? Because we only found out about a lot of this stuff through a lawsuit. Hopefully we don't have to go through that process again. Does that make sense?
No, it makes a lot of sense. And one of the ways.
And how many random visits also?
Yeah. I will tell you now that the city, if you, and I say keep going to the website, but the city is responsible even now with submitting the search terms and things that the court has actually said every quarter. I want to see certain items that you are doing. I want to see those searches, and I want to see those reviews. So the court already has those things in place. That's one proactive thing. Am I missing something?
No, I'm Will Perry. I'm one of the counsel for the monitoring team. And I think it might be helpful for me to say, so a lot of what we're talking about has already happened. The court has already ruled that the city violated the consent decree. So I want to say that first. There was a question about whether the scope of the consent decree exceeds the First Amendment. That's already been answered. The court already answered that. But in response to some of the specific things you're saying, like what proactive is being done, what the court also did when it said the city violated the consent decree was issue these sanctions, these 5 sanctions. And so as part of those sanctions, the city has to submit certain documentation to us, and it has to submit certain documentation to the ACLU. And so that aspect of this process is not complaint driven. Part of the reason that Mr. Stanton keeps referring you to the website is because you can see that aspect of the work that we've done there. And I appreciate the justice piece of people, not everyone having access to the internet and not everyone having access to reading and writing. But if you want to see what we've been doing for the past 7 months, we can't render hundreds of pages of information in an hour and a half. But we can show you in chart form what we've been doing from a policy review standpoint. We can say, hey, City of Memphis, send us your training policies, the ones that you've been using in the past. Show us what you're gonna do to change it. ACLU, how do you feel about those policies? Do those things represent the interests of the people? And then we can say, using our policy experts, we agree with those recommendations. We don't agree with those recommendations. We like that, but we tweak this aspect of the recommendation. And that's part of what we've been doing. This community forum is a part of a second stage. Now we need to talk to you, right? And I know that the community forum is not enough, but it's part of what we've got to do. And one of the things that you'll see on the website is this set of 90-day goals, and it includes individual meetings. and individual meetings with activists and specific people that have had complaints. That's part of the reason we're referring you to the website, not to avoid answering your questions here, but because a lot of those questions already have been answered and they've been laid out in a way that allows you to hold us accountable as we try to hold MPD accountable.
Yes, sir.
I have another question, or I guess first, I think it's important to point out that under the consent decree, political intelligence and legitimate investigative activity are not necessarily distinct. You can have an investigation of crime that nonetheless it involves political intelligence. And so my question is, and what the decree says in those cases is that the investigating officers have to obtain written consent or written findings from the police director, I believe, detailing certain things, including a statement that the investigation is using the least intrusive means. So my question is the police department currently complying with that? What does the monitoring team have in place to ensure compliance with that?
I can tell you read the decree. To answer your question, yes. To this point, and again, I preface it by saying to this point, it's been our findings that the police department and the city are complying with, as Mr. Perry just mentioned, kind of the new rules and regs that are in place. And so the answer to your question is yes, they are. And we have an audit and compliance, so the court wants to vet that. That's part of what we're doing to say, hey, these are the things that we're going to do unannounced, Judge. This is what we're recommending, so we can make sure we have the procedures in place to see, make sure that, I call it, no one is getting cute, that no one is circumventing the process. But yes, to this point, I can say that the city has been compliant. But again, this is where the collaborative process comes in. If you know or you believe you have evidence or a situation that says otherwise, please share that with us. But again, we're going through the process. And again, these are, we keep saying, go back to the website, we've been working, there's been a lot of work put into this. And I think a lot of the questions may be answered if you see line by line what the city has recommended, what we have disagreed with. The court wanted to make sure that the ACLU is in this process. And so I will tell everyone here tonight, are we close to having this wrapped up and put a bow on it? I don't think so. In fact, this is our first meeting of this kind, and we're rolling our sleeves up to move forward down the path of getting this right. And this is, I won't say it's not easy work, but it's not. I mean, I don't know if you can look at another city that's grappling with this and we can say, hey, we can just cut and paste their policies and we will have, magically we will have everything on track. And so, thank you for reading. I mean, you obviously have read the consent decree, and that's exactly what it says. And for those that's here, in the event that there is political intelligence that may be going on, there are procedures and protocols of notifying the director. There are certain time limits that you, and certain parameters that the police department, in a legitimate investigation, they have to comply with when it implicates the political intelligence definition that you eloquently recite. Maybe time for, I want to make sure, yes ma'am, we hadn't heard from you.
Hello everybody, good afternoon to y'all. The question that I have, it's gonna take us all the way back. I'm hearing everything that's being said. However, some of the gentlemen are not here, they've left. This is for the panel, basically for the panel, everybody, and for you, the ACLU. Has it even been considered, or are there any members? Because the gentleman kept saying, where are the members? There are no members on your team. You know, I don't see any members. So this is just basically going off of what they're saying. But I'm asking the panel, I'm asking the ACLU, where is the community in this? Have y'all even considered getting members in the community to serve on your team so the community can have the voice that they need, to have the voice that they trust? Because it does seem like we're just going around in circles here. So I would like for that question to be answered. How do y'all feel about having actual people from the community to serve on the team?
That's a great question, and I leaned over to Let me first say that Judge McCullough picked the team. I mean, I gave nominations or suggestions, but ultimately he approved up or down the team. Right now, you have pretty much everyone here is either have a legal background or some specialty from a subject matter expert standpoint. I hear what you're saying, that you think there would lend somewhat credence if there were some other folks who may have been in this audience or others to be a part of this team.
And excuse me, with all due respect, I understand. Everybody has, like you said, a legal background. And I'm not saying that y'all are not a part of the community, because obviously whether you're in Nashville, whether you're here, you are a part of somebody else's community. However, here in Memphis, there are people that were in this room that has come hands-on with these issues. Y'all don't think that having somebody that maybe who does not have a legal background, who don't have the accolades that you have, could sit with you to help bring some solidarity into the community? Because I see it being split. I understand. I know you have to have legal tactics. You have to be strategic about things. I understand that. But the community has legal tactics, and they're strategic in other ways that they could probably 9 times out of 10 share with you guys and then come to some type of consensus. That's what I'm saying. Everybody's definition of education is not the same. It's not the same. But that does not make the community any less smarter than it makes your committee. So that's that, because I'm sitting here and I'm listening, and I'm like, wow, the community is angry, which they have a right to be. And you're doing what you're saying the same thing about, check the internet out, look at this, look at that. And I thought about what the young lady up there said. A lot of people, when you say that, it's true, and you should say that. However, a lot of people, that's going over their heads, because the subject matter, what's going on right now, is what their concern is. I mean, there may be some of us who may go to the internet and may look at the internet, but I feel like totally considering putting people in the community on your team will bring more answers. It'll bring more solidarity, definitely more transparency. Now, if y'all don't want to be transparent, I understand that. But if y'all want some true transparency to go on, and you don't mind the community knowing about what's going on, then I say get some of these communities, because we're all marginalized. That's what it sounds like to me, like our voices are not being heard. So get somebody on the team, members of the community. Thank y'all for listening.
Thank you. That is very good information, and I will make sure that the court is aware. I do know that there are other communities that actually have input from other community members. And again, this is our first forum. We didn't expect everyone to come in and agree. Again, this is not the first time. Greg will tell you that I've had to stand before individuals who may have disagreed or had an opinion about me or the work that I'm doing. But I hear you, and I hear the sincerity of saying, I think we all want the common thing. And I want to be clear that when I say subject matter experts, and it's not about an educational background or anything, that's not big eyes and little U's, but I'm just saying that is what the court, and if you look across, again, we have someone who's doing this work in New Orleans, who's doing this work in Baltimore, who's doing this work in Chicago. We know those 3 cities have their challenges, and they have monitoring teams. They're all communities.
Exactly.
And so, again, I hear exactly what you're saying. We can't change that, but we can share the will of this body and the community, and share those items with the court, and we'll see what happens next. But that is very insightful comments. We appreciate it. And I will say this, and I don't know if you know the other individuals. Again, the gentleman here and many others have given us proposed solutions and so I will say, and I know sometimes there's nothing wrong with getting emotional, but we're here for solutions, and There was one gentleman who gave me his card, and I gave him my word that when we do a focus group, and you sound like someone that we would love to have, a voice of the community, but that's vitally important. So this is only one phase of the community engagement. Have those individuals, I'm glad the gentleman gave me his card. There were a couple of those that left, and I said, can I, and they said no, and I get it, they're frustrated to a certain degree, but I'm gonna lean on you, if you don't mind, because it seems like you have a connection, to help maybe facilitate the gap, if you don't mind. Thank you. Mandy, and I think Rachel will come to you, and we may have time for one more question.
And just to also chime in, the last time we went to the court had a hearing and invited the ACLU to come, invited the city to come and the monitor to present their findings. One of the things that we brought to the court was this issue of needing community engagement. And the court did put that on the monitoring team to make sure that the monitoring team was speaking to the community. So that's specifically something that the court said that they needed to do. And to that, and that was very important to Judge McCullough at the last hearing that we had, where he said, I want to make sure that people can get to the meetings. I want to make sure that you guys are thinking about when you have the meetings. So this is not something, well, you know, maybe we can do it, maybe we can't. The judge says we have to, that the monitoring team has to do this and has to speak to everyone and should. And that is something that we as the ACLU can bring to the court the next time around and bring some ideas to the court about how to do that better.
Right.
So,
and I understand that when you say have meetings, speak to the people. I'm talking about actually having someone in the community on the team.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying speak, because I mean that's what this is. Y'all are on that side, and we're here. We're being spoken to, and I'm not saying we have an issue with that. But at some point, something has to cross over.
right. And so that's what the court was saying at the last hearing, was that it's the monitor's job to listen to what the community has to say. And I hear you saying wanting to have someone on the actual committee. The ACLU is not on the monitoring team. So we are a party to the lawsuit, but you're absolutely right that the community needs to have a voice in this process, 100%.
There you go. Thank you.
I think that we have maybe one more. Yes, sir.
I heard you say that you felt like the police were complying based on the...
Yeah, yes.
More or less, you said you felt like the police were complying?
To this point, yes.
Point. If you came into information otherwise, or if in part of your work you discovered that was not the case, or maybe there were some egregious examples of conduct that we don't know about, but that may be directed to people in this audience, would that be available? Would that information that you guys discovered, information that you uncovered in the course of your work, to what extent is that, would that be publicly available?
Let me say that we would share it, first and foremost, we would alert the city that we believe they're in violation. But of equal importance, we would share it with the court. That is, when I mentioned, I think one of the first things I said to the court, pretty much said we're Judge McCollum's eyes and ears. I don't think the court will take too kindly that he's already issued an order and sanctions. He's issued a monitoring team. And so, yes, we would, two things we would do. We would alert the city of the violation, of what we believe is a violation, and first and foremost as well, alert the court and get our instructions on next steps from there. And again, the judge has been very clear that of his position on the city violating this decree, and that he does not want to see that going forward since his ruling. Very good question, sir.
I don't understand. Does that mean that it would be publicly available? Will it be on the website as meeting notes from the court? Like, will it be? I think.
Yes. Well, and again, that would be subject to the court. We don't have the authority. There are some things that the court wants to make under seal, and only for the eyes of the attorneys. That's not our call. And again, I just want to be clear. A lot of what we're doing, we're following instructions of a federal court judge. And I know that the will of many of these individuals in this room want it to be more expansive. I'm not suggesting that it can't be at some point. gentlelady here to my left had some very good points that we will take back to the court. But until or unless Judge McCullough gives us authorization to do otherwise. But again, eyes and ears, we have heard and seen what you've said tonight. And again, it's documented, it's being video real time. So to answer your question shortly, that would be up to the court as to what he allows to be made public.
And the ACLU, of course, if they are the advocate of the plaintiffs, could argue that that should be made
Sure.
public.
And there are things that, there are times that's exactly right. Rachel?
Yeah, I don't want to take too much more of people's time. I know that we're almost at 8 o'clock. Partly, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate. There has been so much that's been shared in this, and I know there's a lot more to be shared. I'm extremely appreciative of that. Part of what I sort of had on my mind was with respect to what a couple of the gentlemen who left had said. And I completely understand why they decided to leave when they did. I hope that at some point we'll have an opportunity to connect with them directly. I would really appreciate it. I think it would be incredibly valuable. I know there have been a couple of comments about, you know, sort of, I guess, sitting back or sort of the, you know, the perception of being separated from this. I will say I'm not a member of this community, and I'm not a member of a heavily policed community, and I will be very upfront about that. My background personally is working on issues related to, I think Ed had mentioned briefly, police use of technology, police surveillance, and especially with respect to disproportionate impacts on communities of color and communities of activists. I do that through the Brennan Center where I work, but a lot of sort of policy and advocacy work, which is what brought me to this. I very much hear the comments about both learning more about how people's lives individually are being impacted, and the comments about systemic issues, right? And sort of not being able to disregard either of those, both how it feels to be a member of the community and be impacted by surveillance, and also about how that ties together more broadly. So I'm very cognizant of those, and I hope we'll have a chance to connect more and learn more. I'll leave it at that. Subject to, I defer in terms of sort of the overall process of how we're setting up focus groups, how we're setting up meetings, things like that. Ed is very much going to be leading that. But you know, subject to that, I'm happy to share contact information, things like that. So I'll leave it at that. But again, thank you both to people who are here now and to those who were here earlier and shared their thoughts and shared their frustration.
Let me just say this in closing. I want to say thank you so much. I mean, there are many other places you could have been on a Thursday evening. Again, I want to thank Mississippi Boulevard and Dr. Turner. But you know, the bottom line with this team, and I will tell you, we have robust, debates, and it's not everyone on this panel or monitoring team that we always agree with. We always come back to making sure that we do our best to get it right, make sure that we are following in line with what the court has instructed us to do. But the fact is that you came out tonight. It means a lot, and we were expecting to hear very vivid comments. Just if you look at in the news, you can tell that this is something that the community is very passionate about. And again, being from here and being a lifelong Memphis, Shelby County, I knew that we could not have any credibility without taking the work that we're doing to the community. And so I know this is our first time. This is raw. This is uncut. But I do want to assure you that I hear, and we hear what you're saying, just to piggyback what Rachel said. We will come back and we will be leaning on you. Again, we can't fix what we don't know about. So there's a collaborative piece of this. I would say give us an opportunity to share with you that we have noble intentions. Somebody said, well, you're on this side of you. There's a reason why the court said I'm selecting an independent monitor. So many of our views don't necessarily always agree, but I think that's good. We have a robust debate and dialogue as we are trying to get it right. We circle in with ACLU. Certainly the city has a position. Director Rollins will tell you he has a position as it relates to public safety. But this is the cornerstone of our democracy. This is the cornerstone of what the work that we're doing, transparency and accountability. And so hold me accountable. It's on videotape. I know this is, and purposely, we wanted to, everything we're saying, we're not hiding behind anything. We are here. And again, help us help make this process better by sharing with us the information that you have that can make this process better. See, we're out of time, but I would be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity to say something.
I hate to leave something like this without knowing what the next steps are. You know, the whole idea of everybody
Great.
showing up and then forgetting, like,
Absolutely.
so the timeline for focus groups, when's the next, community event going to be?
That's a great point. I have some dates now. I do know that our next quarterly report will be filed by the end of the month. We have August the 27th, the next hearing before Judge McCullough, where we have to report, and there were certain things he said, look, I want a 90-day plan. I mean, the judge has really been very direct as far as what he wants to see in very short order from this team. And so I guess immediate steps, we have a quarterly report that we will file. All the things that we've done over the past quarter will be posted. We'll file it with the court, and he will post it on our website. And again, going back to what Mr. Perry mentioned, you will see line by line, we have been going back and forth, getting information from the city and coming up with new policies that we believe will address and make sure these issues do not come back up in the future. So that's next steps. One, look for our quarterly report within the next couple of weeks. Secondly, we welcome everyone. Pack the courtroom out. I think, and when you say the community has a voice, it would be good not only to come here in front of us, but come before the individual who actually is in charge, and that's the judge. I mean, it's the U.S. Federal District Courthouse, 167 North Main Street. That will be August the 27th, and we welcome you to come in and share your thoughts with the judge when the judge gives an opportunity to do so. Great question. And we will also, third thing, we will follow up with focus groups. We have leaned on, and will continue to lean on the ACLU to give us ideas of those groups that we should meet with. The gentleman lady right here to my left gave us some good examples of people we should be meeting with. Some were sitting in this room, some may still be sitting in this room. Share that information. If you want to be a part of the focus group, let us know. We can't contact you or make you a part of the process if we don't know that you're interested and willing to play a part. So that's the other piece is, yeah, we had the community forum, but more specific focus groups where we can have one-on-ones, if you will, with groups and get and solicit information. Great question. Anything else on this as far as next steps?
When are you coming back?
When are we coming back to do this? So we have focus groups coming up.
You don't have a date?
No, we don't have a date. I will tell you what we told Judge McCullough. We believe it will be sometime in October. I will tell you, we tried to get the Ben Hooks Library, that may be the next place that we do this, centrally located. But that Central Library is booked up months in advance, but we may be back here, but it may be at the Shelby County Main Library. But our target date is sometime in October to come back. And I would like to think in between that time, we will have met with a number of focus groups to even get more information and the will and pleasure of the community. All right.
Last, there's a rally tomorrow night. Maybe one of you want to come and see what happens.
Where's it back home?
80 Monroe Street. Everybody else in this room knows about it?
Immigration Court, 80 Monroe, and Manuel
Mid-South Peace and
Duran
Justice is one of the
will be there
sponsors
as
of
well.
it. Tomorrow night.
7 o'clock.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I mean, if you don't all have to fly out.
I believe it's the journalist, Latino journalist that was arrested detained by ICE.
I'm an organizer with it. It's
So what did you say?
in the detention facilities. Manuel Duran got released from jail today, or interned camp, and he will be there with us tomorrow night. During an action by the multi-agency gang.
I think what he's saying is you might get to come and see like what the police actually do, like how they use, their sky cop cameras and Root for Life is that surveillance. They put a sky cop camera out while we're having that action, or if they're, what are they doing with the body camera footage? How are they using that? Are they still trying to get information about individuals who are there on the scene and guising that as public safety, right? Because they did that throughout the lawsuit. It was all about public safety, nonviolent protests. Like he was talking about at City Hall, right? which they have Skycop cameras all over downtown. So if you even do a protest at City Hall, you're gonna be on camera. Like, how do we know, like, what they're, you know what I'm saying? That's a big point.
Facial recognition.
Right.
Database.
And that was raised over here earlier about facial recognition software, so those are the kinds of things that we explore.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming out. Everyone be safe going in.